Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So glad to see you all. Nice to be together, although it's gorgeous outside, and hopefully everyone's going to get some time out there because these days are going to pass. So we're going to talk about how to know if you're ready to raise capital. I have been an entrepreneur myself. I have raised capital for myself and for others, and I've had lots of folks come to me over the years and ask me about raising capital. I think every day on my LinkedIn profile, I get 3 people asking for $2 million, at least 3 a day. And they think that if they send me a LinkedIn message that I will help them get $2 million. And I have no idea how to discourage that thought, but hopefully I'll do a little bit of that today. So I find that there's a lot to becoming ready to raise capital. And almost everybody that tries to raise capital has a good idea and has done some of the things to prepare to raise capital, but there's a lot of things that have to be done. So I think it's useful and productive to go through a list of what those things are. And maybe maybe you'll notice something on the list that is an area where you need to focus. So we have a lot to cover, so I'm going to get started. Feel free to raise your hand, ask a question anytime. Okay? Right. So we're going to have a checklist at the end too. And I know that everybody will have these slides. So at the end. Okay. So you begin, you have an idea and you have to begin by figuring out, is there a market for this thing, this product or service that I want to bring into the world? So you need to demonstrate the need for your product or service and the viability of your business idea. And you need to do that with verifiable data. And I could think of so many examples, but one of my favorites is I'm a advisor for the McGinnis Ventures competition here. And I had a company maybe 2018 or 19, that had a really interesting app for a market that involved, they thought, a service that was targeted toward women between the ages of, say, 30 and 45. That's what they were pitching. They had an idea, they had an app already developed, they had a pitch deck, and this was their target audience. So the first thing I said to them is, okay, you need to go out and do some market research with live people. You need to take that app to some people that are in your target market and get their feedback. And they were very hardworking. Within 2 weeks, they had 100 people that had tried their app, which I thought was pretty great, given that they were all full-time students as well. And they came back and they said, it's really interesting. Everybody keeps telling us that it's nice, but it seems like it's for children. And so I said, well, you definitely want to bring a startup into the world that exists, not the one you think exists. So let's talk about that. And it turned out that they pivoted to a use case for children, and they took off like a rocket. So that's an example of getting verifiable data. So it's very dangerous to just think, well, this is a good idea. But when we test our case, it helps to bear out whether it really is or is not. Okay. It's a really good idea to not walk this path alone. It's hard enough to start a company. It's really hard when you're the only one. I'm happy to report my first startup. I started in 1997. I'll bet lots of you weren't even born then. And it was immediately cash flowed our first month. And the reason was I had a business partner that had all my weaknesses. He had all his strength. And the things that he knew how to do, I didn't know anything about. The things that I knew how to do, he didn't know anything about. And we came together, and it was just a great way to launch a startup. So I do not advise starting a company alone. Think about what you're not good at. Find somebody that is. Find somebody that you get along with really well. Don't do it in 2 weeks. Make sure you get to know them first. You've got to be able to trust them. Trust isn't something where you add water and stir and you have it. You have to actually get to know people. But doing it with someone is good. Advisors as well. So you need to know people that are in your space, people that have expertise. If it's going to be if it's a fintech, then you need somebody with deep financial experience. If it's a med tech, you need somebody that's got an MD maybe, or some other type of credential. You need people that understand the space you're in. And nobody understands everything, but there certainly are people that have deep knowledge in these spaces. So I'm very big advocate for at least one, better than that, 2 co-founders. Okay, a business plan. I see a lot of, I often see, I say to young people that come to me, do you have a business plan? And they kind of roll their eyes. Like, it seems like an anachronism, right? It's a real, do people still do those? Yes, they do. And you can go online and get a format, or 2,500 formats. I'm sure they all have them, but write down on a piece of paper, what is your business? What are you going to do? What's the problem you're solving? Who do you solve it for? What are they going to be willing to pay you for it? How big is the problem? It's very structured. It's very sections. What's your go-to-market strategy? What's the whole thing? So get it, write it up. Don't talk to anybody about money till you have one. And get a few people, when you're done with your draft, have people read it. Make sure it makes sense to them. Especially people that don't know anything about what you're doing. I often say to my students at Tepper, I'll say to them, get one of your friends that's majoring in opera to look at this, right? Or one of your friends that's, getting a graduate degree in fine art or something. Anybody should be able to read your business plan and understand it. You should not need an MBA to understand it. Don't use acronyms. If you use an acronym, define what it is first. You don't want alphabet soup in your business plan. You want anybody that picks it up to be able to understand it. Don't assume specialized knowledge or jargon. Okay. Okay. My favorite part, the numbers. So you need a financial model, pro forma, Latin for projection. Okay. So I'm going to do one of those professorial things people hate. So what's the difference between accounting and finance? Anybody?
Accounting or looking backwards, finance forward.
Yes, thank you. Everybody already knows that, right? They just didn't raise their hand, right? Yeah, I asked that of my students in the first day of every class, and I stumped some of them, which is a little disheartening because they're seniors. But anyway, accounting looks backwards. Accounting tells you what happened yesterday, last month, last year, last decade. Okay, you can't. If you do anything in a business context, you have to account for it. You have to describe it with numbers, what happened yesterday. You can do accounting extremely well. You can get a CPA, you can get a PhD in tax and know nothing about finance. You don't need to. Accounting looks backwards. When you have a startup, when you're an entrepreneur, you have to tell your investors, this is what's happening going forward. You can't do that without finance. Finance uses accounting as a structural method, a sort of a format. We use the same kind of financial statements, but it looks forward. If you have an existing company with traction, you start with the existing numbers and you project forward. But when you have an idea, you've just got to start from something and say, this is what we think is going to happen. I don't recommend telling anyone that you're going to make $24 million in 6 months. People do it all the time. I don't recommend it. Do a pro forma, have some people with experience vet it, take a look at it, make sure it makes, someone's not gonna just take you not seriously at all because the numbers are too auspicious. So you need to project your sales revenue. You need to project the costs that are going to be incurred to produce that sales revenue. Costs have to go into 2 buckets: cost of goods sold versus expense, above the line, below the line. The ones above the line are costs you must incur to make a product. So if you're manufacturing something and you have to have metal in it and you have to have utilities to make that metal into something, you have to have a machine with lasers, you have to buy a robot, those are costs of goods sold. Expenses are things that every company needs, but they are not directly related to production. So marketing expense, sales expense, office supplies. Everybody needs those things, but they don't directly relate to making the product or service. Okay, so you got to get those things projected. How fast are you going to grow? What is going to make you grow? What are your growth rates? What's your burn rate? So does everybody know when I say burn rate? Anybody here doesn't know what I mean? Don't be shy. Yes, thank you. So the burn rate, when you do a pro forma, a projection, you're going to do that looking forward, and you do it by month, not by year. Okay, so I can't tell you how many pitch decks I'll get, and then, well, we're going to do this much this year and that much. Yes, and in what month are you going to convert to profitability? You cannot do these things on an annual basis. You can start annual, but then you have to break it into 12-month increments. So the amount of, so typically with a startup, when you begin, you don't make money right away, right? You have to spend money and spend money and spend money and hope and pray that you will make money at some point. And when you begin to make money, you become profitable. That profitability will grow and grow and grow and grow until it makes up for all the money you've lost and makes billions of dollars for other people and you, right? Okay, so the burn rate is during that period when you're not making money, you've projected out, I need to raise $2.6 million to get to profitability, and it's going to take me 18 months to do it. And the reason I know I need $2.6 million to get to profitability is because I have created a pro forma that shows my traction and my costs, and I add up the amount of money that I burn through every month until the month when I become profitable. Those monthly increments of money lost is your burn rate. So I'm burning 100,000 a month, or I'm burning 50,000 a month. Obviously, the lower the burn rate, the better, right? The faster you get to profitability, the better. Okay. When it's very important, again, when will your business turn a profit? Because that's going to determine how much money you need in order to get there. And that's going to tell you, that's what I said, capital needed to get to profitability. So do not do this with a broad brush. Experienced investors are going to want detail, and they are going to punch holes in your analysis. Gee, Susan, how did you get that number? Right? How did you come up with this? What makes you think this is a realistic projection of your revenue? Why? So have the why. And you get that by showing it to lots of people. And lots of people will say, well, what about this? What about that? Write down their questions. Figure out what they're asking you. Get good answers. Okay. All right. So your potential customers. You think you've got a solution to a problem and it's brilliant and lots of people are going to pay you money for it. Okay, let's find your prototypical customer for that. If it's a business, find some businesses, they're willing to consider it. If it's something, it's B2C, find some people that are going to use your product or service. If you have a major client interested in your product, get them to be willing to share with other people why they want to buy your product or service. What is it going to do for them? Why do they find it compelling enough to spend money on it? Get that written down, and then go get one of your friends that's majoring in English to read it and make sure that it sounds right and that the punctuation is correct before you put it online or in a pitch deck. A couple of typos in a pitch deck will kill your chances. If you can't get the bugs out of your pitch deck, how are you going to get the bugs out of your startup? Okay. So, real ability. So, just because you have an MBA in finance from Harvard doesn't mean you can start a successful company. Lots of people put in their decks all of their degrees and all of their things. That's not important. Certainly it is, but lots of people, Bill Gates doesn't have a degree, right? So there's not necessarily a direct line between letters after your name and your success as an entrepreneur. So what direct experience do you have? Things like, I really want to, I'm starting a, I'm going to start a business in the food industry, like when Mario Batali started Italy in New York. I mean, that's a huge endeavor, but he's Mario Batali, so he had credentials. He is Italian. He was starting a business in the Italian vernacular of cuisine. He's a celebrated chef. He's been on TV. He's got none of that as a degree. It's real life experience that plays directly into the startup that he's beginning. So what happened in your life that makes this particular startup make sense? And then always, if you find, and there's none of us have everything we need to be successful as a founder. We all need additional skills. So try to figure out what those are, where when you're going through these processes, when you're going through pitches, when you're going through the development of your deck, which parts do you feel most insecure about? Which parts do you feel like you really need some guidance on? That's your intuition telling you, find an expert in this area and get them to come and collaborate with you. Okay, so a brand, very important. Yes, go ahead.
How much does that influence your ability to be or to work in that particular market? Should you even put it having advisors kind of thing, but quite a different thing from people where they're like, okay, people are going to put money on you and not on your advisors. So,
oh, okay. Yeah, so that's a little bit of conflating two issues. So everybody in the investment community knows that who's going to do the work in the startup? You, the founder. Advisors advise, they don't work. But when you come to an inflection point, okay, I've got to make a big decision. Do I invest in this marketing program or that marketing program? It's super great to have a VP of marketing that's got a resume of national experience to help you decide to go right or left. Nobody thinks they're going to do the work. They know that it's the founders and the founding team that do that. But having people with deep market experience and decades more lived experience than a young founder does is always a good idea, because entrepreneurship is just a series of decisions. And it's really better to make decisions with people that have already made them and they know what is going on.
So you believe that they should have a place in your team's like in a pitch deck where
I don't. That's a good question, but this is just my opinion. You take what you like and leave the rest, right? There'll be lots of opinions you come across, but your team is one thing. Your team is who's working in the company. The very next slide, who are your advisors? They're not the same.
Another question was previously where you mentioned about the testimonials and the business plan, and that being as simple as it can be, that even someone studying finance or who is not aware of that particular business or market can understand that. Again, to that, there's a contrary opinion that maybe customized like the person who's going to read it, expect what they know and then write or read. Right? A good example would be that I'm working on a legal startup and taking 5 slides to ease people into how big of a problem a contract review is. But most investors already read contracts every other day and they understand contract review as a market as a problem.
I wouldn't go there. What you just said, I have been in plenty of rooms full of investors who do not do any of that. So I would push back on that assumption. All investors, there's no amorphous all investors. All investors don't do anything. All the same. Believe me, they don't. Yeah. Investors are people that have money to invest. That's the only thing they have in common. But I will tell you this. Nobody has one deck. You have many decks.
Yeah.
Typically, I've seen people raise money that have 100 slots. They have 10 that they pitch for this audience. They have 90 in a supplemental deck. Yeah. And then the next day, they're pitching to a completely different audience. They got a different 10. But they have the 100 that they can pull on. So, and I am not saying you don't understand your new business model in terms of that you can speak to an expert about it, absolutely. But what if you don't know, when investors walk in a room, you don't know how big of a check they're willing to write, you don't. You don't know what it does in a month. And if you are compelling enough, they might pull up their checkbook and write that check. And you will never know if they did or not. You will never know that. It's not public, right? It's just very much, it's your chance to pitch, and how you sound to them is going to determine whether or not they invest. What I am advocating is humility, right? So humility. Make no assumptions about the knowledge that your investor has. If you use some word they don't know, and they don't care to have you explain, you might miss an opportunity to get investment. On the other hand, if you know the investors in the room, they're there because you're pitching to somebody with specialized knowledge, feel free to use a different pen. But there's no such thing as one pitch deck.
Yeah.
Does that help? Yeah, so, okay, so the branding is the marketing of your business. I am not saying that as a startup, you have to invest tons of money in a logo. That's not what I'm saying. But it's a very good idea to have a clear understanding of your startup's identity and the market positioning of it. There's a very good book from the 1950s called Positioning by Rees and Trout. It's a little tiny 100-page book. Highly recommend it. It's still exactly the same great advice on marketing that I read when I was here a student at CMU a long time ago, and I highly recommend it. I give it out all the time. You want to inhabit a singular place in the mind of your consumer. You want the buyer of your product or service to think of you as the solution to their challenge and to be aware of you. So that's what marketing does. It creates awareness and it identifies you in a unique market position. So it's very important that you give some strong thought to that and get some good help, because you cannot afford to waste money on bad marketing, especially as a startup. Yeah, and you can use that marketing to very concisely explain the relationship between your product or service and the market it's serving. So again, if you're serving kids, you're going to have something that looks like it's serving kids, right? Yes. Sure, it's called positioning. One word, positioning with a P. Rees, yes, Rees and Trout, R-I-E-S is one of the authors, yes. Okay. Allison, I'm not moving. And I don't know why. I pressed the button, I promise.
Let me tap this, try it one more time.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay. So you've got your investors in a room and you've shown them your first 8 slides, and it's time to tell them how much you want. So how much money do you need? When do you need it? And what will you use it for? So there's a slide in every deck, sources and uses of cash. So I want $1 million. All right. If you get $1 million today, what are you going to do with it? And what traction will you get because you got that million? I can't count the number of times that I've been in initial presentations with young entrepreneurs or early stage entrepreneurs, and they're so fixated on their idea and the problem they're solving. And someone says, okay, how much do you want? And they didn't really think through that. Oh, I had one person say, I want $500,000. I said, great. Why? Because someone told me you never ask for less than $500,000. That is true. That is a true statement. Like, I don't think that's the reason you should ask for $500,000. So again, circling back to those financial pro formas, that tells you how much you need because you have described with math what revenue you're going to produce, what's it going to cost you to produce it, when will you produce it along a timeline, what's your burn rate every month, how much do I need? That depends on when I get it, right? As soon as I get it, I'm going to do this with it. And as soon as I do this with it, I'm going to increase my traction. And it's going to be measured this way. Yeah.
So one thing I've experienced is like, it's gonna sound juvenile, I guess, but like when I was going out and I was asking for $750,000, then people they kind of like, he must not know what he's talking about. Like, it costs more money to run a business. And then when I started asking for more, like 1.5 and 2, then people suddenly like started raising their eyes. I'm like, oh, okay, you must have a business plan. Do you find that there is a sweet spot, or just like investors, if that's something where it's just so personal to you individually?
No, it's a really good question, and I'm glad you brought it up. So when you are an investor, you get pitched so much, you see so many of these things that you start to go over time. You're like, if you ask me for $500,000, we all know you're going to need more in 6 months, and it takes longer than 6 months to raise it. So don't ask me for $500,000 because I don't want you spending all your time raising money. I want you to get the capital you need to do the work, right? So, and investor, the entrepreneur, of course, is always, I don't want to ask for any dollars I don't need. The less I ask for, the more likely I am to get it wrong. That's a figment of our imagination. I read an article somewhere in the last year. It said it is harder to get $500,000 than it is to get $3 million.
Wow.
And it's because you do give the impression that you're not thinking very big if you only need $500,000, or you don't really need me because you've got a lot of friends and family money, or you've got your own money. I never took $1 for any of my startups. I paid for them myself, right? So investors are like, well, do you need my money? Do you want my money? Are you going to allow me to influence you if I give you my money, or do you just want me to be a silent investor? There's a lot to it. So how they think depends on who they are, what they're doing. And it also depends, I've found in my own personal investing experience, if you're starting if you have a business model that I am really personally invested in, I have a child with cancer and you have a med tech startup that's going to address exactly the kind of cancer my child has, I'll give you $25,000 if you want that, right? But if you are saying, I'm going to, I have an app that's going to create world peace, and I need $500,000. Would you invest in that?
That's
No.
too long. So the inverse there is like without like wanting to constantly be raising. I've heard like 24 months, 18 months.
18 to 24, no less.
No what?
Don't, and if you've got performance that you have tested, everybody knows performers are wrong when they're being stuck. But you've got to have one. It shows your ability to model, right? And if you've got a burn rate and your 18-month burn rate is this, it sums up to this, and you ask for less than that. Is it not?
Yeah.
Doesn't it depend on the evaluation of the company?
The valuation of the company? No, that's the tail wagging the dog. So first you build this up and the valuation comes from that. We're gonna, that's on the later slide. Yeah.
Can you mention what is actually mean by that second thing, like said when we make this on slide, if you put that tentative date, I want to close this down.
Well, no, that's a good question. Those are separate. So yes, when you're ready to raise money, you've got everything done. You're all buttoned up. You have your whole deck. You've got your whole business plan. Everything's written down. Everything's great. And you have your burn rate and you have your pro forma and you know what you need and what you can use it for. You've got all of that done. And you're actively raising money. You have to have a way to bring that money in, and you have to have a time frame. So in that scenario where you've done all of this, which is a 200 level course, we're doing 100 level right here, right? So this is just a high level overview. But when you get to that point, yes, you do want to say, I want to close this round by the end of September. You need to create a sense of urgency. Does that mean if someone says, if you give me till the first week of October, I'll give you $500,000, are you going to tell them no? No, you're not. You're going to change your date, which everybody does. Everybody knows that. It's a game we play. But It's much better for you to say, I need the money by this point, because then, again, they know you want the money so you can go do the work. Because raising money is hard and it takes a lot of time, and you don't want to spend any more time doing it than you have. That help?
Yep.
Okay. So when do you need it does not mean by September 30th. It means when in the cadence of your business plan do you need the capital to keep going? In other words, you've got a little bit of money right now, and that gives you a runway of 3 months. So at the end of 3 months, I better have more money or I'm out of business, right? That's what that means. All right, so the payoff, the exit. How will investors get their money back? Is it going to be because you're going to go public? Is it going to be because you've sold the company? Is it going to be because you paid them back because you did so well and you want to keep the company for yourself? When will they get their money back? Typically, they don't want you to use their capital for more than 3 to 5 years. So what's going to be the event that gets them repaid in that time frame? What will their return on investment be? They want to compare. Any investor that you're asking for money is looking at you versus 100 other companies they can invest in. Why should it be you? Because your return on investment is higher and the time to exit is faster, right? Those are the two reasons. So you have to do the math and know those answers. And everybody knows you don't know for sure. You just have to have a really good way to describe, you think it's going to be this, and these are the reasons that it makes sense that it could be that. Okay, and then crowdfunding, which is another, way of funding a startup. There are these levels, these rewards that you provide for people that invest certain amounts. If you invest $25, you get this. If you invest $100, you get that. And you have to already think about what those rewards will be in those levels of reward when you're before you're finished with everything you need to do to raise capital in that way. Okay. All right. So again, we were talking about more than one deck. So the initial deck, 10 slides, right? Just enough to say to an investor, you should pay attention. This one is different than the other 100 you're looking at. This is the vertical we're in. This is the area, the space. This is why this founder makes sense. This is why this product is so compelling. Okay, that's the deck. Okay, and again, never feel shy about having a supplemental deck. You can have 90 slides in that supplemental deck. You can have graphs that will show everything. If an investor says, gee, I'm wondering about this, you told me this, but I'd like to know this. Great, no problem. I've got it right in my supplemental deck. I'll bring it up. Here it is. Shows that you did the work, shows that you know your numbers, shows that you don't want to make them walk through 47 slides because they'll want to die, because you're only one of the companies they're looking at that day. And then the teaser version is even shorter. It's just a couple of slides that you could attach to an email when somebody says, I know somebody that's invested, that has invested in your vertical in the past or has a personal interest in it, or someone makes an introduction and you send it to them. And it's respectful, again, because you're not sending them 50 slides. And I can't tell you how many people will say on LinkedIn, here's my 40-page slide deck. Will you let me know when you're finished with it? No, I won't, because I'm not even opening it. Right? I'm not sitting here waiting for you to pitch me a deck. I have other things on my agenda. Okay. Okay, so now I'm an investor and you've gotten my interest and I've seen your pitch and I believe your pro formas and I think you're incredibly adept at what you do and you're well suited to run this company. All right, how do I invest? Give me a one-pager. I'm raising $2 million on a convertible note. I'm closing on this date. Minimum investment is this much. The terms are this, an implied valuation of this, right? So there's lots of other, you could go on the Connects channel and come up with all sorts of slide decks on how to do terms. And there are Tepper has lots of attorneys that come in and talk about term sheets and investor summaries. I'm not getting into that topic right now, but that's the kind of information you need to always make it easy for an investor to invest in you. Because you could spend all your time getting them to be interested and they say, okay, great. I want to invest. What do I do? And that's when I've had entrepreneurs sit there and someone says, okay, what's the minimum investment? They never even thought of that. They're thinking, if you want to give me $10, I'll take it. No, you can't. It takes too much work to take in an investment. And once they're on your cap table, they're on your cap table until you exit. And you do not want alphabet soup on your cap table. It's too much work. So you have a minimum investment so that if you need to raise $1 million and the minimum investment is 100,000, then you're going to have 10 investors on your cap table. That's all you want. Less is better. Yep.
What is the cap table?
I'm sorry. A capitalization table is a document that it's like an Excel spreadsheet, and it lists the names of all the qualified investors that have invested in your company and how much they've invested and on what day and what kind of shares they bought. Did they buy common? Did they buy preferred? Did they buy member interest in an LLC? What did they buy? And you need that so that you can report to the SEC. You have to file that with your taxes. Every single one of your investors has to have tax documentation at the end of every year. We all have to prove what we're invested in. And if we make a big profit, we have to pay tax on it. Sorry about that. I didn't,
So is this the same as the executive summary or both are different?
they're very different. Yeah, they're very different. The executive summary is just what's the idea? What problem are you solving? How are you solving it? Why is it so compelling? You know, I'm starting the startup. I'm going to create world peace. It's only going to cost $1 million and I'm going to exit in 18 months and we're going to make $1 billion. Okay. And then this is, I'm really serious. I want to write you a check for $50,000. How do I do it? Do you have the documents? Do you have a document you can give me that I can read? I can give it to my counsel right now. What's the bank account the money's going to go into? Do you have that account set up? What's your corporate formation? Are you an LLC? Are you an S corporation? Are you a Delaware C? What are you? Where is your bank account? Which bank? In what city? That kind of boring stuff. Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know if you already went through this, but when you recommend starting a policy, and I guess formalizing the company?
That's a good question. Yeah. So you can't take in money if you don't have one. So certainly before you do that. I always did it first. Just personally, I always did it first. That was the first thing I did. I also never vacillated. I was never like, I think I'll start a company or maybe I won't. I was like, yes, I'm starting a company, boom, off, right? So it made sense. Of course, you need to form your corporation. You can't do anything. So I would say that the minute you're going to begin spending money on your idea, you should form the company first, because you need to be able to have a fictional being in which to house those expenses so that you can document them for the IRS. Okay. Okay. So again, the ask. This is what I'm at. This is the amount of money I want to raise. And sometimes they'll say to you, okay, you want to raise $1 million. What if you only get $500,000? What are you going to do then? Are you going to close down? Are you going to run as far as you can with the $500,000? What is your plan? It's a really good idea to have an answer to that question. But do it after you talk to some other folks that have already been there. Okay, this is the term sheet. This is a legal document. You don't do this yourself. Okay, you get legal advice to do this. This is really important. It lays out the specific investment terms of this particular capital raise. The kinds of things that we've been talking about. So investment amount. I'm raising $1 million, minimum investment is 100,000. Those are investment amounts. Valuation. If in order to take in money, you're going to take in money as equity or with the option of equity. A convertible note is debt that converts into equity. That's why it's called a convertible note. When it's signed initially, people give you debt, and there's terms in that document that say, when these things happen, my investment becomes equity. And because I'm one of the first investors, my investment becomes equity at a discount to people that come in after me. And that discount is defined in the legal document. A valuation is an implicit dollar amount that a company is worth. There are courses you can take at Tepper in how to do that, but there's many methods of establishing it. If you own a going concern, if you own a company that's been in business, say for 10 years, and it needs to be either sold or perhaps the owner is going to pass on the entity to their next generation. By law, you have to get a corporate valuation. There are people who do that work, create corporate valuations and have licenses to do just that. But you can do the work, you can get a preliminary valuation yourself. And in large, like venture capital funds, and valuations can be, I've heard people say any company that has these characteristics is worth $6 to $8 million, end of story. You know, there's a lot of, it's some of it's art, some of it's science. But a traditional way to do it, if you do purchase a corporate valuation for an existing company, which you don't do for startups, although there is actually an app that a lot of people in New York use for it. They look at the company three ways. They value it three ways that are known in generally accepted accounting principles to be valid. And then they average the three, and that's the valuation that you get in a certificate. One of them is discounted cash flow. So you take that pro forma, you look at it for 3 to 5 years, and you say, this is how much money we're going to generate. You discount that back to today. You know how to do that math. That's one of the ways that you can value a company. But there's a lot of discussion around valuation. But by the time you take in an investment, if you take an investment on an instrument that requires a valuation, that evaluation has to be part of that document. Again, that's a 300 level course. We're just talking 100 level here. I'm just trying to make sure everybody knows what I'm, yes.
What do you think about being private, about the money you've raised versus very public?
You can't be private with it when if an investor says to you, how much have you raised already? You have to tell them.
But I mean, like in the media, like they startup X raised Y amount, undisclosed amount or whatever. Why do they do that instead of just saying they raised X $1 million?
I have no idea. I mean, that's very a big preference. I couldn't imagine doing it because it's so risky. There's so much that can change. And it feels really prideful to me. And again, I'm preaching humility, right? So if you got money, spend it on building your company. Don't spend it on telling everybody you did it.
Yeah,
So, but that's a personal preference. That's not corporate theory. Take what you like and leave the rest on that one. Yes.
So, as there are many ways, there is some valuation from another. Yes, so when you mentioned it as a exit or whenever another valuation happens, so we need to keep our valuation methodology, if we shift the methodology as some game.
No, that sounds very logical from a math perspective, but it's not that way. And valuations for startups is very different than valuations for exist. So if you've been in business for 20 years, there's a cadence to your net income. There's a cadence to your revenue. So you have some data on which to do certain types of valuation. You don't have any of that with a startup. With a startup, you're just saying, gee, wonder how much this company will make in 5 years. And we don't have anything except a good idea. So what they do, it's more like when you buy a house. What's the house worth? Well, you look at what houses around there and sold in the last year. Are they similar? And you do comparisons. So we've got a startup, and the startup is in the food and beverage industry. and it's a drink. And it's got all these characteristics and it's serving this kind of customer. And in the last 5 years, or the last 3 years, or 2 years, there have been 6 of those kinds of companies sold, and they sold for 10 times revenue or 20 times net income. And so maybe this one will too. And that's kind of how it goes. If you do not, I wouldn't. If you have a company that's been in business 20 years and you want to use the same valuation method over time, sure, but with a startup, it's going to very much depend on the investor. The investor will say, I like that method. Or I'm going to value you based on that. I think based on that, you're going to do this, and so I'll invest or not.
Between networking happen, like which valuation method investor wants to do in the market.
They're not going to come to you and say, do this valuation. They're going to do it themselves. And you're not necessarily going to know which one they use. But in their head, they're going to say, I think you're worth $5 million. So I'll give you this. If you have a valuation of $1 million and I give you 200,000, I own 20% of your company, right? So that's what they're doing. They're saying, if I invest $1 million in you, what percentage does that get me? And what do I think the company to be worth? What's my investment to be worth? Okay, so the other thing is voting rights. So you can invest with or without voting rights, depending on the kind of investment you make. If I am an expert in genetics and you have a genetics startup and I invest an early $1 million, maybe it's because I think I can help you grow. I can help advise you, and I want a board seat to go with my $1 million. And if you want my $1 million, which you probably will, you're going to give me that board seat. But in that case, I'm going to want it in writing what rights I have. And that's part of this. Okay. And having a board is a really good idea. And you don't have to wait until you have 10 million in revenue to have one. And you don't have to be forced into it. You can have an advisory board to start, and you can have an actual board whenever you start raising money. I have personally sat on advisory boards and regular boards of companies, and it's really helpful. It's just like a bunch of people that have experience that are just there to help you make decisions as you go along. It's proven in study after study. 5 minds are better than one.
What is the typical expectation for a advisory board member? Which means as the founder, should I allocate a particular percentage of type of people for that?
I'm sorry,
For the
for advisory board member, what are you looking for in a person? Or
Yeah. So for example, if the board, which means any investor will see they will already put money and they will get a board seat.
they don't all have. They don't all want it. I know a person in Boston that's invested in 250 companies herself. Can you imagine her sitting on that many boards? No, she doesn't. She just wants to write a check. She trusts you. Go. It's investors that are really very forgive the term, but invested in some way in your industry or in what you're doing, or have a reason, or they think that you're really smart at the science, but you really need some help with corporate finance, and I'm good at that. So okay, right. So there's no rules to this. There's just every situation. It's like a relationship. What does this person want out of the relationship? What does that person want?
So what is the difference between a normal board and the advisory board?
So that a board has voting rights. These are the board members that can say, I want to fire the president and I want to hire somebody new, and they say you can or you can't. That's your board. Advisory boards are people that have domain expertise, and you say, gee, I'm thinking about using, going in this direction on my strategy. What do you think? And you pay them a little bit for their time for doing it.
Is it a remuneration or a kind of equity?
It's up to you and them. It can be either one. Some people do, lots of people have, for 1 or 2% of the company, they will be on your board. And they'll give you the domain expertise and let them use their name and likeness. But it's very much those people think that's great. I'm sure nobody's dying to talk to me. Uh-oh. Okay. So where do you get money when you're raising money? Am I out of time? Am I late? Okay, very good. So there are different types of capital and different sources for the capital. So bootstrapping is just a euphemism for doing the work yourself and using your own money to pay for it. That's all that is. Okay. Friends and family are saying that the first people you go to are people who are investing in you because they love you, right? They're your friends or your mom, your dad, your grandparents, whatever. You don't have to have any of this. You don't have to have money to start a startup. You don't have to have rich friends and family to start a startup. It's just that some people who do. And so you'll see these words on lists of potential sources of capital, which is why I'm discussing them. I'm not saying it because I have an expectation that everybody's going to go to their grandfather and get $1 million. That is not why, but it's something you'll see over and over again. Okay. Seed capital, seed, smaller amounts, right? 50,000 to $1 million. They come from angel investors, individuals who know you, individuals who just are in the space and believe in you, and specific venture capital funds and angel investment funds that focus on early stage companies. One thing that I didn't put on here that I would like to mention so that everybody remembers it is if you are starting out and you're getting your first bit of capital, your first slug, you will need a lead investor. If you take all the angel investment funds in the country, a very small percentage of them are willing to be lead investor. So when you're looking at them, figure out if they do that. If you don't have a lead investor and they're not willing to be one, don't pitch to them. Focus on the ones that are. Yeah. Can you explain more what the lead investor? Sure. A lead investor is the investor that comes in first. They're the one that says, I'll take the first risk. And because they're the lead investor, they get a lot of input into the drafting of your term sheet. They say, I'll give you the first 100,000, but I want these kind of terms. So they're very important. It's also, they become sort of the leader of the band, right? So if the lead investor is someone a lot of people respect, they reach back and they go, I stepped in. If you get your first investment from Melinda Gates, lots of other people are going to say, I don't need to see your deck. Just tell me where to send the money. Right? Okay. And then you go on when the capital gets bigger and you have more traction and you go into a Series A, a Series B, even a Series C. And that's when you start to raise money with investors who are very knowledgeable in the industry in which you're part of the market where you're playing, in your vertical.
So is this the numbers that subject to the type of industry they are in? I mean, the kind of CDC, it's a general control. It's
These are not, these are guidelines only. That doesn't mean that you won't find a VC that wants to come in earlier. There's how many.
It's like a particular industry wide or a particular region wide. For example, if I go to LA or San Jose, I think to the investor, can I get the same kind of seed from there? Or is it from every city in that particular industry?
No, it's not. It is not by industry, but think about it. If you're in startup, in SaaS, you have an app. You don't have any capital. You're not buying any machinery. You don't have any real estate. You don't need to hire. All you need is some engineering talent. You can buy that part-time, right? So everybody knows you don't need as much startup capital. If you're going to make solar panels in Arizona, you need a property, plant, equipment, people, regulatory advice. You need a lot of money, right? So the amount of money you raise goes along with the business model. And again, back to the pro forma, you've already told them, I need 10 million to get started. Well, we understand why, because you want to build the next lunar rover. Well, of course you do. But you're not going to get that if you got an app, right?
So you think those like hard times are already harder to raise money compared to like software?
No, I do not. I do not think that at all. I think that actually there are funds who just say, I'm only doing SaaS. That's all I do. That's what I know. That's what I do. But there are people everywhere looking at all sorts of things. And as a nation right now, I'm talking about America, we have a national interest and we have a federal government that's very invested in investing in manufacturing. We have the Advanced Research for Manufacturing Institute, just about a mile from here. The number of millions of dollars they're getting is astounding, right? So if you want to start, you have a new way to make a battery, I guarantee you're going to get some public money right now. But it's, none of this is simple. I'm not trying to convey that it's simple, but these are parts of the fundraising equation that's important to understand. And this is just meant to be an intro. Okay, this is really important. Investor fit. So there are investors like my friend in Boston, only invest in very early stages. They want to make a big impact with a small investment. They want to be the one that says, I'll be your lead investor. I'll give you your first 50,000. Enough for you to flesh out your idea and see if it's worth continuing. There are people who, again, only invest in technology. There are people who only do fintech, who only do food tech, who only do insure tech. People that are only doing med tech, right? So you need to understand, look at the investor, find out who invests in these things. You can, it's all over now. I mean, it's used to be much more difficult to figure out who invested in what. Now you can go to sites where they have investor profiles and the investor raises their hand and say, I looked at these, I invest in these things only. But most of it is really getting to know the investors through lots of personal introductions and discussions and small group discussions. And that's why fundraising is so expensive, intensive, and takes so much time, because people aren't really going to give you, unless, I mean, there are people who have so much money that $1 million is nothing to them and they're more than happy to do it. I know of a startup here that got $15 million in the last couple of years, and they're very young and they're very green. And the people that gave them money, it doesn't really matter to them if they take bets on lots of companies and they just happen to take a bet on them. And if it doesn't go well, that's okay. I was the co-chair of an investment committee for a new angel investment fund that started up here in 2016. And what we realized is that you look at companies, we can't tell. We can make our best guess. We have a nice investment committee, 8 different smart people that all have MBAs and have been experienced. And we all say, we think that one is going to make it. But we all know the odds of a company making it are not that good, right? So it's really a law of averages. So you invest in as many companies as you can so that you know if you invest in 10, one's going to make it, it's going to make enough and it's going to pay for the other 9. So but you can increase your chances of getting money if you align yourself with someone you know is already interested in your vertical. I had a company that a couple of years ago that has a fabulous brand and a fabulous product. And they pitched to somebody that didn't know anything about their part of the market. And you could tell just by the questions they were asking. And it turned out that's a big waste of time. And when you're raising money, you don't have time to waste. So you want to make every one of those presentations to somebody that has the ability to invest, the desire to invest, and is motivated to invest. Okay, so these are just examples of some verticals. There's plenty of others. Okay, so how do you do it? What are the ABCs of it? You make a list of potential investors. Where do you get the potential investors? You ask everybody you know. You talk to people here. Dave Mawhinney knows every investor in east of the Mississippi, so he's a great resource. And then you create a spreadsheet and you put all their names in it and you say, what do you know about them? How old are they? Do they or don't they have children? What state are they? What's their career like? What are their interests? What kind of degree do they have? Anything you can know about that particular investor is going to help you. Follow them. See if they're in social media. What are they doing? when you offer your term sheet to an investor or they come to a presentation, you ask them to invest money and they say no, ask them why. What was the issue? Why, if they're actively investing and they said no to you, it's important for you to know why. And that'll help you iterate and learn as you go. Okay, here we are. So go away. Well, how do I get rid of this? It won't go away. No, it went away. Okay. So here we are. This is the list of 17 things that we need to do to be ready to invest, to take an investment. I'll bet you didn't expect 17 things when you came here today. Okay, I've done all the talking. Anybody have any questions? You're going to get a copy of this emailed to you, so it's okay. Yes.
So I have a startup and my startup is based in India. And something which I have faced a problem with, especially in initial stages, was gender bias.
So if you go to CMU Connects,
Yeah.
I have 3 Connects talks on angel investing for women investors.
Okay.
They're right there and you can watch them and you are more than happy to. There's plenty of it. It's proven that in America, of all the venture capital every year that goes to privately held companies, less than 3% go to women.
Yeah.
And that's the same less than 3% that it's been for the last 20 years. And everybody talks about how it's getting better. It doesn't get better. But you know what's really great? Now there are women investors. And they only invest in women. And they've got lots of money.
Yeah.
So you don't have to waste your time.
Yeah, other people that really wanted to invest in Bay Area, there I found a couple of investors. There's more of focus on women empowerment.
Not only that, they're not just in the Bay Area, I believe in Boston, New York. There's, I have a presentation on just that. I have a map that shows where they are. I didn't give you the names of them.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so, yeah, absolutely. And there's that because it's there's some kinds of biases that are just very difficult to eradicate. And it's just, one of the things that amazes me is, so we just passed the date on which women in America had the right to vote for 100 years, the 1919 vote plan. And if you think about it, men had to give women the right to vote because women couldn't be in Congress. And there's a memorial in a park called Constitution Park in Tennessee, Nashville, Tennessee, because the representative from Nashville was the representative, so they gave the vote that put that gave women the adopted 1920s. There's a story about him. Why did he do that? He was in his 20s, 26. He was one of the youngest members of Congress. His mother's a widow. He raised him and his siblings alone at a time when women couldn't go to college. She read several newspapers every day. And before he took that vote, she wrote him a personal letter and told him that what he decided affected her. So it's not simple. And I think women have got to play on the power. Don't beat your head against the wall. You know it's going to hurt. And when they want to help you. Yep.
We have an online question. What can you say about the importance of having a track record before going to investors? I.e., should you bootstrap for a year or two versus going to an investor right away?
So that's a great question. So as a person who has bootstrapped, I think you should go and get some help right away. Not necessarily investment, but get an advisory board, get people to help you, get people around you that have more knowledge than you, because so much of running a successful company is the same, right? Every company needs a strategic plan. Every company needs a finance strategy, not just a marketing strategy. Every company needs a viable product or service that meets a need. Every company needs to be able to describe and communicate that need. There are things, the disciplines that every company needs. My favorite thing is that typically, and I see it all the time, people say, I know I've got this brilliant idea. There's this big problem and I'm going to solve it. I have a solution to it. And I guess the best analogy is I'm a great chef and I want to open a restaurant. And why do I want to open a restaurant? Because I love to cook and I'm so good at it. I'm going to make great food for people. And you will, and you can, except you also have to know corporate finance and accounting and legal, and you don't want any of that. You hate that. That is not what you do. That's not what gets you out of bed in the morning. But every company has to do those things. So you need another person who, like me, finds those really boring things exciting, right? And then you have them do it. So you can go do what you love. So if you're a scientist that has a PhD and you've been doing some research for 20 years on something, and you've got the point where it's commercializable, right? You're going to commercialize this thing. Do not be so prideful to think that you can also do the corporate finance well, and you can come up with the strategy well, and you can do the marketing. You can't do any of that. You are a research scientist. You have a great product. You need a lawyer to protect that product. You need intellectual property protection. You need somebody else to do corporate finance, somebody to do performance, somebody to negotiate. But you're obviously incredibly impactful because it's you own it. It's your product forever. I don't know. I can't see whoever's talking, but I hope that helps. So I do think that you do need to try. Bootstrapping is always good, but you don't need to learn everything by yourself. It's like Oprah said, why do I have a book club? Because I don't have time to read all the good books in the world. All right, I need other people to read them and tell me about them. None of us can do it all. None of us. Anybody else? Yeah.
What do you think is the way that people are interested in helping you with something that they don't have? You know, some sort of like obligation or interest in.
You know what's that's a great question. You know what's really interesting? People love to help other people. People love to be of service to other people, especially if you're doing something that interests them as a cause that they are invested in, and also in you. There are people who just like to help you because you are young and you have an idea and you want to pursue it and you're earnest and you're intelligent, and there's people who just really like to do that. It's very hard to imagine. So I graduated from Carnegie Mellon in 1982. Okay, so it's very hard to put yourself in my shoes. I've been working for more than 40 years. I think about things in a way that you can't possibly just because of your age. But I can tell you that I spend tons of my time just helping people because I like to. And because I have 40 years of experience and I can. And some of them get invoiced and some of them don't.
For bridge rounds, do you think all 17 of these are still necessary, or because you're going to familiar investors?
Oh, no. Yeah. If you're going to a bridge round, you've got all this, right? Because you've updated your business plan every year because you know it, you're supposed to. And you've got all your performance updated and you do that every month and you, right. Yeah, no. Actually, if somebody knows the business intimately, they know that you're working really hard and they know that you're making traction and they can see the traction because you've got great financials that are closing every month. Why not? Yeah, I know. Listen, I know companies that are in business 10 years are going to close every month. So I do recognize that everybody, just because we know we're supposed to do things, we're all spending our bed in the morning, but we don't all do.